Hey, Ron G here with a small reaction to the recent For Honor closed beta. Yes, I'm late with it, and everyone else already posted theirs and praised the game in all sorts of manners, but I still wanted to chip in. Before getting into it though, a thank you to Ubisoft for letting me in along with a huge pile of other players, and a note that I played this on the PlayStation 4. Okay, let's get into it. This game is awesome and I'm not going to buy it. For Honor is built around melee combat with elements from different geographic areas, cultures, combat styles, etc., drawn from a 1,000-year period in Earth's history. There are turn of the previous millennium Vikings fighting late medieval samurai and Carolingian or Frankish knights and infantrymen. Combine this with the maps and it looks like time shattered and brought together a mix of warriors and buildings. You almost end up looking for a Roman centurion fighting a laser pistol wielding cowboy, though that might have been me watching Doctor Who and the Legends of Tomorrow. The combat is the centerpiece, and the controls boil it down to guarding against attacks from one of three directions and launching counterattacks or trying to break the other player's guard. There's a usual bevy of options, light or heavy attacks, special attacks, and unlockable skills, or just trying to pin the opponent. The individual engagement can take anywhere from 5-6 seconds to 20 or even 30 seconds, and catching someone off guard with a heavy attack will quickly destroy that person. The controls work, they are functional and sort of intuitive. They do not mimic other similar games, so there's little transfer of skill. This might cause some people a moment of dissonance, but you should be able to learn them through the tutorial and practice in the AI duels. Sadly though, there were no options for motion controls. When you finally do take down an opponent, there's the option to spend time on a finisher move to keep them from being revived. This can be crucial in the Dominion game mode, especially if both sides are breaking and cannot respawn. You can play as any of a variety of characters from any faction, even as you selected to support a specific one. Of course, each character type has a different attack speed, mobility, and a bunch of other stats. You will need to adjust your style depending on who you choose. For example, trying to stand my ground using the Viking Berserker was a bad idea, and I never managed to guard against any attacks with that character. Instead, you'll find that dodging and rolling becomes crucial. For the Dominion game mode, you can also level up the gear you wear to try and alter and improve the stats of each character. Anyone who has played Ubisoft's The Division will be familiar with the basic concept of finding loot, dismantling it or upgrading it, and comparing stats of armor and weaponry. It doesn't affect anything in the other game modes, and seems to be a decent enough addition to the game. Interestingly, during the closed beta, there was a point when word spread on the forums that Samurai was superior, and soon enough, the 4 vs 4 Dominion game mode saw a majority of players showing up as them. They were faster, but still easy enough to dispatch. The other game types, the 1 vs 1 and 2 vs 2 duels, were generally spread out with different characters, but at least in 2 vs 2, matchmaking seemed to be struggling, occasionally pitching 2 high-level players against 2 low-levels. When you finish a multiplayer match, you get the option to deploy war assets on a map to help your faction gain territory. While initially interesting and perhaps part of the endgame, it ultimately seems meaningless and irrelevant. Sure, you can take pride in the advancement of your faction, but you cannot actually fight directly for a region. There's also the curious side that in order to assist an area, you have to play a specific game type. This part looks designed to try and force you to play every game mode, but since it's overall a hollow part of the game, it fails at directing you to these other modes. Visually, the game is nice, but a bit grainy on the PlayStation 4. Frame rate seems stable except when there's network hiccup, and the models and textures look like the Ubisoft team did a good job both in research and recreation. Slight niggle is that when you trigger your character's special move, it plays the same voice bit every single time. Some variation would have been good, so it wouldn't be "You split the day, Peter" every 2 minutes. So why am I holding back on running out and buying this game? Well, various things, but one more than any other: network issues. Throughout the closed beta, there was a constant flow of network issues. The game freezes as people dropped or joined, complete disconnects mid-match, and at no point did we manage to create a group of players that lasted for more than 2 minutes and rarely even 20 seconds. We tried everything we could think of, but most times players left a group as soon as they joined, or they simply didn't join completely. Now, it's tempting to say this is just a beta and it'll be better for the release, but a core part of this issue is that everything is peer-to-peer, something that could well require a rewrite of the network stack and the renting of dedicated servers, neither of which will be done in the 2 weeks between the beta and final release. The peer-to-peer nature also means that one player will be the host, and at random times, I check the scoreboard during Dominion games only to see the host having the highest kill-death ratio. Could be coincidental, but I'm worried it might not be, and having effectively zero latency does confer an unduly advantage. My final concern is that the 4-minute duels and 10-minute Dominion matches will bore me. They are good fun, for a while, but part of me would rather have a 30-minute slogfest on a larger map with more activities and objectives. Yes, 10 to 15 minutes is a good sweet spot for casual gaming, and most games try to avoid going 30 plus minutes in a match. But if I'm sitting down for a game with the gang, I want to be able to build up something, strategize something, organize something. There are other topics I could bring up around especially the Dominion game mode, for example the minions' behavior, but all of it seems to come down to hitting that 10-minute gameplay. The game overall also seems like it's not a complete game. There's no exploration, no traversing mountains or manually assaulting a keep or fighting through the halls of a castle, or, well, lots of things. It leaves me with a feeling that there will be a more fleshed out For Honor 2 in 2018 and 19. The single-player story was omitted from the beta, but at this point I generally have little to no faith in these, in what are essentially multiplayer games. To conclude, the beta was fun when it worked, and when I wasn't getting disconnected. But I'm not sure the game will last long enough for me to warrant the cost, and with the network issues and network design, it just becomes a no-buy from me. If you're still excited to play it, I suggest to wait a week or two after release and see if these issues persist, or if Ubisoft manages to alleviate at least the worst of the disconnects. For Bouncers, I'm G, and it's been my pleasure.